Allah Azza wa Jalla, He says in Surah Al-Muddathir, وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ. The waw in the beginning is like the English capital letter. Like when you start a new sentence, you begin with capital letter. In Arabic, waw can be used for many things, over 21 things. One of them is al-isti'naf, to start a new sentence. So you could think of the waw in the beginning as a new sentence. The rest of the ayah says, رَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ. Now listen to this carefully. What's the first letter you hear when I say رَبَّكَ? What's the first letter of the Arabic alphabet that you hear? Everybody heard the ra? رَبَّكَ. Now listen for the last letter. رَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ. What's the last letter you heard? Okay. Now listen carefully for the second letter. رَبَّكَ. What's the second letter? رَبَّكَ. Ba. Listen for the second last letter. رَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ. What's the second last letter? Ba. رَبَّكَ. What's the third letter? Kaf. رَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ. What's the third last letter? You notice something? It's spelled backwards and forwards the same way. It's spelled backwards and forwards the same way. In English literature, we call this a palindrome. Something that spells backwards and forwards the same way. Like Bob or race car. Race car is an interesting palindrome in English. Allah Azza wa Jal gave our Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam words that He didn't write down. وَمَا تَخُطُّهُ بِيَمِينِكَ. Allah tells him, you didn't write anything down with your hand. You don't know how to write. So this is entirely an oral exercise for the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And once he says something, he doesn't edit it. He doesn't correct it. That's it. Allah revealed it and that's it. There's no, I didn't mean to say that, let me change the way I said it, etc., etc. Right? It's exactly the way Allah instructed him to recite. The challenge for mankind is, you see, the ayah, the simple translation of the ayah would be, declare the greatness only of your Lord. That would be a simple translation of وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ. Try to say, declare the greatness only of your Lord in English, or French, or German, or Japanese, or Chinese, or Italian, or Russian, or Urdu, or Farsi. You pick the language. Say it so that it spells backwards and forwards the same way, and say it so you only have one attempt orally. No writing down, no looking up in dictionaries. How possible is that? Subhanallah. I can translate the ayah, but could I translate the miracle in English? If I tell you, declare the greatness only of your Lord, you get some of the message, but do you get the miracle? You don't get the miracle. The miracle of Qur'an is in the Arabic language. And this is just one small example. The Qur'an, every ayah has its own miracle. In one place in Surah Al-Ahzab, in Surah number 33, this is easy to appreciate. He says, I'll recite the Arabic first, مَا جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لِرَجُلٍ مِنْ قَلْبَيْنِ فِي جَوْفِهِ. Allah, the one to be worshipped and obeyed, did not place two hearts inside of any man. I'll say that again. Allah did not place two hearts inside of any, what did I say? Man. So obviously, who's being excluded here? Women are. Now if he said, He didn't place two hearts inside of any human being, now that would have been inclusive, wouldn't it have been? But he used the word rajul, which is exclusive of women. It's specifically referring to men. And what's even more peculiar is the rest of the passage deals with women. It's very interesting. The rest of it deals with spouses and all of that. But the first part of it is particularly assigned to men. The other thing that's also peculiar, and I want you to remember, is that when hearts are mentioned, now where are hearts located? In the chest. And this is actually a figure of speech used in the Qur'an all the time. Al-qulub allati fi sudur. Hearts that are in the chests. In other words, the Qur'an commonly mentions that the hearts are placed inside the chest. But in this particular ayah, I'm not going to say verse, ayah, instead of saying He didn't put two hearts inside the chest of any man, He used the word jawf, which refers to the entire body. It's not a restrictive term to the chest. He said anywhere inside of him, He did not place two hearts. Now this is the two peculiarities I wanted to bring to your attention. And this is kind of obvious. Because a woman
can get pregnant. And if she does, she can have 2 or more hearts. But when she has those 2 hearts, they're not in her chest, but they are inside of her. So Jawf is more appropriate. Subtlety in language. I'm going to talk to you about the biggest surah of the Quran. That's what I'm going to talk to you about first. The biggest surah of the Quran. Now what is it, folks? Yeah, this is surah number 2. Surah number 2. This surah, this biggest surah, number 2, is made up of how many ayahs? 286. 286 ayahs. Somewhere in this surah, the ayah occurs, I'll recite the Arabic first and roughly translate after. وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. Thus we made you a middle nation. One of the utterances in this surah that's found in here is, thus we made you a middle nation. Now what's the Arabic word for middle? Wasat. The Arabic word is wasat. You don't have to know that. But know that this statement, this declaration occurs in this surah. This surah, was it written or was it delivered in the form of speech? Speech. And also, as a historical comment, it wasn't delivered at once. It took almost 10 years to be revealed. So this one surah was coming piecemeal. And while it was coming down, pieces of other surahs were also being revealed. And the messenger would instruct his companions, these ayahs belong to this surah and those ayahs belong to that surah. But when the whole thing is said and done, Baqarah, the second surah, is made up of 286, and in ayah number, listen to this carefully now, in ayah number 143, the Lord says, we made you a middle nation. How many ayahs in this surah again? 286. And where does He call us a middle nation? In the middle. In the middle. Now how do you, I understand if you're going to do this in writing. I understand if you're going to do this in writing. How do you do this in speech? And by the way, at the time, there was no concept of ayah number. Like I told you, ayahs, there are 286 ayahs, and there's 143 ayahs. At the time, they never said, haven't you read ayah 12 of chapter 35? They didn't talk like that. They just recited the ayah. They didn't have this number scheme. When did this number scheme become part of the Quran? When the Quran was finally put into book form. But the generation we're talking about doesn't have a book before them. They don't have that before them. They're memorizing this, and it's completely and entirely an oral tradition. So that's one small example. The nobility given to Jesus in the Quran. I'll give you one remarkable example of it. Which nation was Moses sent to? The Israelites. Everybody knows that? The Israelites. Who's the original audience of Jesus? The same nation or no? The Israelites also? Yes. Okay. Now, Surah number 61, As-Saf. There's one ayah dedicated to Moses addressing his nation. And the next ayah is dedicated to Jesus addressing his nation. Keeping in mind that both of them, even though there's a big time gap between them, essentially are addressing which nation? The Israelites. They're the same nation. Okay. Now listen carefully. وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِقَوْمِهِ يَا قَوْمِ. When Moses said to his nation, begin quote, my nation. Addressing them with what words? What was the first words used to address them? My nation. Ya qawmi, my nation. Okay. Let's come to what Jesus said. وَإِذْ قَالَ عِيسَى بْنُ مَرْيَمَ. When Jesus, the son of Mary, said, Ya Bani Israel, sons of Israel. Sons of Israel. Now what did he not say? What did Moses say that Jesus didn't say? Okay, so Moses says my nation, but Jesus says sons of Israel. Now, sons of Israel is another term used for the Israelites, isn't it? Or the children of Israel. You know what we learned from that in Semitic tradition And in Arab tradition, as was carried originally by Abraham also, identity was given by the father. The nation itself is named after who? Not the mother, but the father, Israel himself. And actually in the Quran, all of humanity are called children of, not Eve, but Adam. Because identity, nation, is defined by the father. And this is natural in most societies. The last name is given through the father. The father's name is acquired, even though there are exceptions. Now, what I'm trying to get at is, to be from a nation, your father should be from that nation. Isn't that obvious? To be from a nation, it's only expected that your father should be from that nation. So when Moses says, my nation, what's he actually saying? That my father is from among you. But Jesus, never in the Quran do we find him say, my nation. Never. Every time he addresses them, what does he say? Sons of Israel. Now why would he never say my nation? Because he doesn't have a father. He's of miraculous birth of the Virgin Mary. The Quran refuses to accept a human father for Jesus, saying sons of Israel. Subhanallah.